Thanks for joining me for episode 37 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. This is episode number 15 of season 2, and I'll be joined by Andreas Johansson. We'll focus primarily on systems that Andreas has put into place to support his district's classified staff and processes that they're involved in. We'll talk about Google Sites, Google Sheets, Google Forms, FormMule, AutoCrat, FormRanger, and ice cream on Swedish beaches.
I'm Andrew Murata, host of the Education, Leadership, and Beyond podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you are listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hello! Welcome in, duct tapers! My name is Jake, and I'm here to talk to you about duct tape and educational technology and how the two things go together to create an EdTech integration mindset that I think can help you in your classrooms or, as you'll see in today's episode, across your entire school district. First up, a note about the length of shows. As I told you in the last episode, I'm aiming to keep episodes under 1 hour in length. So today, I set aside a chunk of our interview as some bonus content. I think many of you are going to want to hear more of our conversation, and if you're one of those people, you can click the link in the show notes to get to it. And if you're one of the few people who don't want to hear that bonus content, the episode here that you're listening to is a little bit shorter because that stuff was taken out. A reminder, by the way, that there's a calendar available for the show at bit.ly/edu duct tape calendar. That's capital E, lowercase du, capital D, lowercase uct, capital T, oh gosh, Jake, lowercase ape, capital C, lowercase Allender. Did you realize bit.lys were case sensitive? Maybe I should have made that all lowercase. Anyhow, you could also click the link in the show notes to get to that calendar. The calendar, though, will keep you up to date on when episodes come out and, more importantly, when our Twitter chats take place. Remember, those Twitter chats, completely optional. You could participate in the chat and not listen to the episode. You can listen to the episode and not participate in the chat, but we do have a lot of fun in those chats, so I like to have that calendar available so that you can plan them all out and know when they're happening. Before we get to today's new content, as always, I'd like to share my calendar of upcoming speaking events. Ohio weather postponed my full-day Flipgrid workshop at Kent State University that was supposed to have happened a few weeks ago, and now it'll be on Monday, February 24th. If you're listening before then, there may be a few spots available, so let me know if you're interested. In March, I'll be doing one of the keynotes and a few breakout sessions about tech coaching at Kentucky's KISTE conference. I'll also be celebrating my birthday and doing a few sessions at the Neotech conference in Ohio. Well, that's a perfect birthday gift for me, getting to present at a tech conference. And no, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being totally serious. My April calendar, by the way, is empty right now. So head over to jakemiller.net/speaking if you're having an event in April. Anyhow, in May, I'll be at the iTip Google Summit in Ohio, where we're going to have an educational duct tape panel session. Super excited about that. And I'll also be at Tech Meet Tuscaloosa in Alabama in late May. In June, I'll be in South Carolina for the Oconee County School District Summer Institute, in Illinois for WitCon, and then, I think, in California for ISTE. In July, I'll be at the Engage Conference in San Angelo, Texas. That's it for now, but I hope to have more to list for you in the next episode. And finally, if you prefer your Jake heard but not seen, you can hear me on Kevin Reinemann's Magic Potion EDU podcast. Kevin and I attended each other's sessions at OETC last week and then also guested on each other's podcasts. My appearance on his is already out and linked in the show notes. His appearance on my show will be out next month. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. So when I was editing today's interview with Andreas Johansson, I was a bit nervous. Andreas gets into some pretty geeky, and by geeky I mean awesome, stuff about Google Forms and Google Sheets. And if you know me, you know that I was loving the discussion because Google Forms and Google Sheets, that stuff is totally my jam. And for many of you, it's your jam too, but I know that some of you, like, maybe that's not your jam, right? And so the issue is, while I was editing, I thought, oh no, are people going to be turned off by this complexity? Are they going to be like not into the idea of using spreadsheets and forms and things like that? Then I decided, you know what? The listeners don't need to know how to do what Andreas and I discuss. They need to know what it is and why someone might choose to do it. And then they can make the choice for themselves as to whether they learn it, right? It reminds me of a sentence from Jen Sincero's book, which has a title that I won't say in case there are kids listening with you, but it'll be linked in the show notes. Anyhow, Sincero says, your job isn't to know the how, it's to know the what and to be open to discovering and receiving the how. Let me say that again. Your job isn't to know the how, it's to know the what and to be open to discovering and receiving the how. And I think that's a pretty good representation of what we talk about here on the show. You don't need to know how to do everything in technology. You just need to know what you're trying to achieve and then be open to figuring out the how. So tune yourself into the what that Andreas shares and then decide if you need to learn the how.
Today's guest.
All right, today our guest is Andreas Johansson. Andreas launches rockets for Streetsboro City Schools. He's passionate about purpose, people, and problem solving. He's a PhD student at Kent State University. He's an INTJ, and in his spare time, he runs in the woods with maps and a few other things. You can contact Andreas on Twitter at RocketCTO or at his website at eajohansson.net, or on LinkedIn, his account is eAndreas, or on YouTube, his channel is titled The EA Johansson, and all those links are in the show notes. Andreas, welcome in, buddy. How you doing?
Thank you. Doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to have you on the show. So Andreas and I have known each other for, gosh, it's probably been like, we're going on a decade. When's our anniversary?
It's probably coming up, and we have all kinds of connections, and it's been a long time, but here we are.
Yeah. So I've been excited to get Andreas on the show because Andreas is, I think you took it out of, it used to be in your bio, but what is it, a Six Sigma black belt or something like that? What's the belt? What is that?
Oh yeah, I have a green belt in Lean Six Sigma, which is all about like process improvement, and it's a business certification. So we don't hear a lot about it in K-12 education, but in the business world, it's sort of about just improving processes. And so I have a certification that I know how to do some of that stuff.
Yeah, well, and it shows in the way you do things, and that's why I've been excited to have you on the show for a while, because you just your efficiency and your ability to streamline processes for the schools you've worked for and stuff like that, and the projects you do on the side, it just always amazes me. So it's good to be able to share that kind of stuff with everybody out there.
I love it. Those are kind words.
Let's play a little game here. You ready for a game?
Let's do it.
2 truths and 1 lie.
I'm ready.
We're going to play a game of 2 truths and 1 lie. So you have 3 statements for me. 2 of them are true. 1 of them is a lie. I'm going to try to guess the lie. I'm probably going to do a crappy job because I always seem to mess up this game. So let's see how I do. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, go for it.
So I try to, since we do know each other a little bit, I try to really come up with some stuff that maybe would stump you. And so growing up, I had a couple of odd summer jobs.
Okay.
And one of the jobs was selling ice cream on the beach.
Okay.
Another job was picking potatoes. And a third job I had was raising chickens for a nearby farmer.
What? I have no idea which one it's going to be. Selling ice cream on the beach.
Yeah, ice cream or potato picker or raising chickens.
Picker or raising chickens. I can't. I don't know if I could see you being the ice cream salesman on the beach. So I'm guessing that's the lie.
That now I can tell you which it is.
Yeah, go for it.
That is not the lie. So I never I have not yet raised chickens, but growing up, I did sell ice cream for a whole summer on the beach. I would sort of shove a bunch of ice cream into this freezer cart and then tug it over to the beach. And this, mind you, this is the Swedish beach.
Yeah.
So, high temperatures of 72 degrees in the air, and then water temperatures of, I don't know. I don't think we ever got to 60. And then picking potatoes, where I grew up was a sort of the hotbed for potatoes early in the season of the Swedish potato season. So we would spend probably 16 to 18 hours picking potatoes. We made a ton of cash, Swedish kroners at the time.
Swedish kroners. I never knew Sweden was a big potato place. Who knew?
Potatoes is one, and then lumber and iron ore. That's where it's at.
Potatoes, lumber, iron ore, cold beaches, and fresh ice cream.
Yeah. Well, that was the worst. The worst job I ever had was picking strawberries. I would never recommend anyone to pick strawberries as a summer job.
What was so bad about it?
Oh my! Because you're on your hands and knees.
Crawling around
10 hours a day. It's awful. But potatoes is pretty good. That's a good time.
Do you have to how do you dig a potato? Do you pull them out by the root, or do you have to dig them out?
Well, you're on a machine. So the key to the Swedish potato season, which is very early, like maybe late May, early June, we get what's called a new potato, which does not exist in the U.S.
Okay.
But it's a potato that's planted super early in the season, and then it kind of arrives in time for midsummer, which is a big celebration. And we do eat a ton of potatoes. Like the Swedes eat an enormous amount of potatoes. And so the farmers try to get these new potatoes up into market. It's really a lesson in economics. So they try to get it to market as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this giant machine that's pulled by a tractor. The machine basically like harvests the potato plant, the whole plant, and then it separates the plants from the potato, like, the bushy green leafy stuff, discards that. And then what we get up on the sort of is this moving, pieces and parts. You kind of you basically pick out the stones more so than anything, or like any detritus that's on there.
Right.
And preferably the earth is kind of like dry and not too moist. And when it's raining, it's just like clumps of dirt. And it's a bad idea altogether.
Yeah, it's no fun. Not as bad as crawling around picking strawberries, but not fun to pull off all the wet mud off of them.
Oh, I would take potatoes in a heartbeat. So
okay.
Spent a lot of time on a potato machine.
A lot of time.
And this is, when we were like, I think I started when I was like 13. And the nearby farmers, I went to school with a son. And so it was him and I, and then his younger brother on the machine, and he would drive the tractor. And we probably picked, a couple of tons a day. It was typical for us to pick probably 5 to 6 tons of potatoes in a day.
Crazy. So this is par for the course for our friendship, is that I grew up mowing lawns and working at a shoe store.
There you go.
You grew up picking potatoes, picking strawberries, and selling ice cream on the beach in Sweden.
Hard labor.
Hard labor.
But, it builds character, as Calvin says.
And that's why you now run around in the woods with a map.
For sure. Absolutely.
So let's dive into the educational duct tape right now. So for the listeners out there, in case this is their first time tuning in, educational duct tape is my silly metaphor that educational technology is at its best when we're using it as a tool, like duct tape, to solve problems or meet goals or address learning standards in the classroom or in our schools. Much like, again, duct tape is a tool. So the tech is not a focus, the tech is a tool. Now, I've got 2 kind of special questions for you based on kind of your expertise and your skills. So even though you've got a background in the classroom as a teacher, your current role is not in the classroom, and your true expertise, even though I'm sure you were great in the classroom, your true expertise is really going back to that lean thing that we mentioned earlier, and using technology and technical processes to be more lean and to kind of streamline tasks. So I want to focus on that. How's that sound?
Yeah, one of the things I really enjoy is making it easier for other people to do what they need to be doing.
Right.
And I try to solve as much of that as I can, regardless of how that happens.
Right. And when it's mutually beneficial to do that, right? Because you get better data or information or processes or successes out of those people doing things effectively. And if you can make it easy for them, then they're more likely to do things effectively, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then, sometimes it even impacts kind of other, I guess like outer lying areas, like by doing something, we might save paper. And, typically people might not think about that, like saving a couple sheets of paper. But when we look, at a building level, or in my role at a district level, that can have huge impacts. And then that means that we are left with sort of funds that we can spend on other things other than paper. Right. As an example.
Right. And when it's nice in your situation because you're doing a process that's making it easier, and then that paperless idea is like a hidden bonus. It's like an extra thing that's coming along there.
Yep.
Right.
Sure.
Okay. So my first question for you, how can we make daily processes simpler and more efficient for staff that normally don't interface with technology? So all of our schools have certain staff members. We're not talking about teachers who don't like to use technology. We're more talking about maybe it's bus drivers, maybe it's custodians, maybe it's people in the cafeteria. So these people that normally are not interfacing with the technology as part of their role, how can we make those processes simpler for them? Because a lot of stuff is moving the technology. So how can we make it easier on them?
Yeah, I think, so I have the fortune now to work with a lot of our what's known as classified staff, or as I think of it, as sort of the other 50% of a school district, a whole team that sort of run operations. So we have, bus drivers, custodians, food service folks, classroom aides, all the people that make stuff happen, but that are not teachers, right?
Right.
And I find that, a lot of them use technology in their daily work, but typically tends to be very limited. So if we look at a cafeteria person, for example, they might run the register, but that's a very limited scope in which they use technology. And what I found over the years, some of the things that we take for granted, on maybe the teacher side or central office or administration side, like just checking email is one of those things where like, that's hard. That's something that the folks on the other, that side of things, they might never do. And so, it's just a simple thing like, hey, check your email. That might require extra assistance or make it easier or build a tool for them to find it. So one quick example would be, off of our website at Streetsboro, we have kind of a whole quick links menu. I call it the launch pad, where just go like, here's your email, here's your account, if you got to call off sick, here's your thing to do that. Just so we put it in one place that's easy to find. And then you can spread that message out and say, well, how do you get to the whatever? Well, go to the menu on our website, because then they only have to memorize one thing,
right?
Like, how do I get to my email? And so I spent a lot of time observing, either kind of, typically I'll just go and sit someplace. Like I get some comments or I get some feedback maybe from the supervisor in that department, or maybe it's my own department, like transportation or whatever it might be. And I'll just go kind of observe. I'm like, all right, so what are we doing now? And what seems to be a pain point? And then take that into consideration with what we're trying to accomplish, and then trying to come up with a solution. And then sometimes, solutions can be kind of short term, like in the lean world, we call it a go-do. So if it's something that you can just solve, then just do it, just fix it right away. And then the other might be sort of more long term, or you need to develop something or kind of build something and then have a rapid cycle of kind of, does this work? No, this doesn't work. Fix it, improve it, come back at it.
I like that you're really applying like a design thinking process there, where you're doing things like asking for feedback, you're hearing the feedback, you're making changes, and then you're looking to see did that help, but you're doing it by asking them, and you're also doing it just by observational. Like you said, you might just go hang out in one spot and observe what they're doing, observe the processes, see where it could be easier or more efficient. And while you're at it, they're seeing that you're present, and they're seeing that you're checking in with them and that you care, and that you're listening if they give you some kind of feedback or if they make a request. I like that, you really are doing design thinking, wouldn't you say?
Yes. And I think I will say that comes to me from the lean world. Like there are some, there's some formal tools there that kind of guide you through that process. And I will say I've been very fortunate to have been opened up to a world of formal thinking around process improvement, because there's one thing to kind of just like trying to solve problems. And then there's another way where you actually apply a formal methodology. One of the concepts that I enjoy, and I share that with everyone, especially sort of administrators or supervisors here in our districts and elsewhere too, is the importance of going to the place where the work happens to observe what's happening.
Yeah. Because
a lot of the time, the further up you go in a school district, you end up insulating yourself from the actual work. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it's just a matter of like I came from the classroom, so I was a classroom teacher. Then I went on to an ESC, or an educational support service center, did some consulting for 2 years, then went to central office, and now I'm at the central office level. So it's not that you necessarily forget what the classroom looks like, or you forget what the lunch line looks like,
right?
But you probably don't go there as often,
right? And
so the Japanese have a term for it, and this comes from the lean world. They call that place the Gemba. It's Gemba.
Okay.
And so that's the concept of you got to take yourself there. And so here as a school leader in Streetsboro, if someone brings to our attention, like we're having a problem with X, Y, and Z, my first reaction is, well, I'm going to go there and look at it. So we had some issues in lunch line in one of our buildings, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be there at 6:30 in the morning. It had to do with breakfast and, how it worked and this and that or whatever. I'm like, well, I'm just going to go there. And so I sat at a table for 45 minutes and just looked and observed. And that teaches you so much. And then as you're sitting there, like, oh, I wonder if this would work. I wonder if that would work. And then you can ask questions of the people that are doing the work.
Right.
And you can say, well, what if, or how about, and that usually leads to a lot of buy-in, because then they've been part of the solution too. So that's helpful.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm sure you discover that the problem that you're there to solve supposedly is actually just a symptom of something else, right? Like they say, like, oh, I don't know, maybe the kids don't know how to type in their lunch number or something, and then you get there and you find out, well, that's not the real problem. The problem is that there's a backup in the line for some reason where the kids don't have enough time to type in their number. Or who knows? But you've got to actually get there at the Gemba, as you called it, to see what's truly happening and how could it be better, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to communication too. So you might hear a concern from someone, and if you were to just act on that concern without gaining kind of, I guess, firsthand experience from a challenge or problem set, you are going to do yourself a disservice. Because if you try to solve a problem or come up with a process to solve a problem remotely, typically what ends up happening is you do a lot of work on your end, and then you ship that, and then it doesn't work because you didn't go and see all the pieces and parts.
Right.
The key is communicating with the whole team and then really understanding the why of why we're needing to do something.
Right. Yeah, and that probably helped a lot. You were talking about that quick links menu for the staff that you have. That kind of process probably helped out a lot there too, where maybe the original thing that you heard was, the bus drivers or whoever it might be don't know how to check their email. And the first reaction might be, oh, well, I'll provide them a training. But then through observation, you realize, well, maybe the biggest problem isn't they don't know how to do it. The biggest problem is it's hard for them to get there. And there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get them there. And there's a lot of hurdles they have to get over to get to their email. So you said, well, let's just create this menu for them. And that will cut down on some of that by actually getting in there and talking to them and listening to them and seeing what the problem is and observing how it works. Yeah. And then after you put it in place, figuring out, what's missing from that menu or what can make the menu better, things like that, by actually like getting in there and talking to them.
Yeah, for sure. And then one of the projects that we're in the midst of, but it's going really well. And that's this, it's called a Bus Driver Hub. Okay. That's the team that I work the closest with, sort of every day. I'm there all the time. So, there are a few things that we got to do as bus drivers every day. One of the things is a pre-trip. So all of our drivers got to go check their bus. They do a checklist that's probably about 40 different items. And not a whole lot of people know that bus drivers do this every day. In the morning, 15, 20 minutes, they check for leaks and, hoses and fluids and lights and brakes. And so this is a process we do every day. So there are two requirements here. One is I got to have an easy way for our drivers to complete that and certify that they've done it, because there's a requirement by law for them to do so. And then on the back end, from the operational perspective, I want it to be easy for me to verify that it's been done, sort of that compliance piece. And what I enjoy the most is I'm able to kind of apply my techie skills to solve problems in an area that how am I going to say this? Like, it's been sort of on an island for a long time. Yeah. And the transportation department in a school district is typically kind of like their own entity. Right. And I've tried to move them into so we're part of the district more. So this driver hub, and I know we wanted to highlight some tools. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. So we're kind of diving into our second question here too. So I'll just throw it in here as we do it. So our second thing was how to take processes that we know by law need to be paper-based, right? That might require a paper trail, and make them simpler. So I know you're probably going to get into some of that too as you go through this. So we're talking about making it more efficient, but we're also talking about making the process simpler involving a paper, procedures that require paper by law.
Or require some sort of certification, which is what the law says. Yeah. But I'm always looking for those opportunities for, one, how do we make it faster and simpler for our bus drivers? We're coming back to this kind of driver hub to do what they need to do by law. And in the lean world, and I'm going to, again, keep pulling these terms out, we think of value, like what's valuable? How do we build value for someone? And there are three things that we focus on. One is if you're doing something and it just doesn't add value to the process or people downstream, you should just stop doing that. But then there's that tricky one where it doesn't really add value, but it's required by law. So that's what we're talking about in the pre-trip. It's not real, it's valuable that they're certifying that they've done their pre-trip, but we do it from a compliance perspective, because I also know that if something was wrong with the bus, they would just come tell us and we would take care of it. Right. And then the third one is obviously create stuff that provides value. So in designing this workflow for them, I already knew then folks that are a little bit hesitant to technology
Mm-hmm.
need a design that's like easy to interface with. And
Right.
so I lent I lent very heavily on, just the way like an app screen looks like on a phone,
Mm-hmm.
because most people don't have a problem using a phone. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what brand they are, but icons, and it makes sense, and you click the icon. So that was my basic idea for the driver hub. The driver hub is not available publicly, although I'd be happy to share like a screenshot with you for the show
Oh, that'd be great.
notes
Yeah.
here. And so what I wanted to accomplish was something that was easy for them to get in on. I wanted it to both work, on like a desktop version,
Mm-hmm.
and then mobile version was needed as well, because a lot of I would say about 75% of our drivers use their own phones to do, check email and things like that. So I needed that to work. And so my quick tool there was a Google site, so I built a Google site. So instead of that menu that it's on our website, which is just like text links, because that was my initial, I was like, I'll just make a resource page and they can go there and they can click a link to get to wherever they need to go. I was like, nah, I'm going to make it visual, easy to click on. And then more importantly, if they're rolling it off their phone, I want it to look very similar. Big icon, click here, do your pre-trip.
Right. That's where it's nice that Google Sites has that built-in preview feature where you can click computer screen, cell phone screen, and iPad screen and kind of get a quick idea of what it's going to look like on all of them.
Yeah, it's perfect. And that's a whole different project, kind of like developing a website that really works, mobile and desktop friendly. But Google Sites makes it super simple. But I will say, and I'll caution, maybe if I can throw some caution to the listeners, it is worthwhile sitting down and thinking about, and you mentioned design thinking, of really kind of like, okay, what do we want it to do? And then what will enable that? Because if you kind of just go in and you just throw a bunch of stuff at a web page, it might work for you because you know where stuff's at.
Right.
But you have to keep the end user in mind.
Right.
The other thing I wanted, and so we'll just mention then like the whole pre-trip certification used to be a paper form, used to be filled out by hand and then turned in, and then nothing really happened with that paper form. And it was really hard to verify from a compliance perspective. So like if I needed to check, okay, like who did the pre-trip on bus 24 on like June 7th of 2019, like it wasn't going to happen. Like it just wasn't happening. We had a different system for the last year or so that I was not part of implementing, that I will say was very cumbersome for the drivers, and it didn't really make much sense, and it didn't even offer up like the checklist. And I'm a big checklist guy. Can I throw out a book recommendation? Is that allowed?
Yeah, go for it.
So there's a book called The Checklist Manifesto. I forget who the author is. Everyone should read it. It's a very quick read. You'll have it done in a weekend or less.
Okay.
But it talks about the importance of just creating checklists in order to like minimize errors, right? That's the basic idea. And so what I wanted to accomplish was that too. I wanted to add the checklist for this pre-trip that we have to do so that they could have it accessible right there to them should they have a question. All of our bus drivers are, I would consider them veteran bus drivers. They know what they're doing. They know their bus. But it's helpful to have a list. Sometimes we have a substitute that'll do a pre-trip and they haven't driven that bus in a while. It's good for them to have a checklist of what needs checked. So what I did is Google site, right? And then if you're looking for easy like graphics to use in your Google site to build big buttons, go to iconfinder.com. There's a couple different ones, but like iconfinder.com, you can go get entire icon sets that'll then look good together.
Oh, cool.
And so what I did is I just went to Icon Finder, and I'm like, I want a magnifying glass because that's what I want the pre-trip thing to look like.
Right.
I downloaded that, and I just I drug in like the pre-made template in Sites that has like the 4 images or whatever.
Okay.
And then I just made rows out of that. So big icons, they stand out, they're easy to find. And then I just linked to a Google form. So the pre-trip certification that they do every day. And I needed this to be a process that was like 15 seconds or less, right? Because they go do their check on their bus for 20 minutes.
Right.
I don't want the workflow then to tell me that she's done that to take very long. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the pre-trip form is just a Google form, and it says, here's who I am. Here's the date. Was it good to go? In essential, is the bus safe to drive? Yes, click submit, and we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted them to be able to get to that from these portals or from these driver hubs that I have up in the break room for them.
Yeah.
Or they can do it off their phone.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too that I wanted to mention there too, we know, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with Google Forms. Lots of us use it for various different things. One of the features of Forms is that you can authenticate who fills it out, right? You can say, especially if you're within a K-12 domain,
right?
Makes it easy. You can say, yeah, they have to sign in. I'm going to collect their email address. What did I already know about my drivers? I knew that signing into the Google account was a little bit of a pain point.
Right. Especially if they're on a shared device too, right?
Yes, that's right. And so I'm like, we're not going to have this like logging in and logging out business,
right?
Because I need 25 drivers to do this in the span of 10 minutes, right? Or whenever they're done with their pre-trips. So what I did is I kind of consciously thought about that, and I just removed that requirement. Yeah. So instead in the form, to make up for that, because I still needed to know like who's doing what and what bus and what time, right? It collects the timestamp, but then I just made a quick drop down. Who are you? What bus are you pre-tripping? And then I showed everyone in person for the date selector. And when you fill out the form, there's an option of then going left and right, like moving forwards and back, like to the next month or whatever, right?
Uh-huh.
But if you click the circle in the middle, there's like a dot. It'll just automatically pick today. And that's kind of a quick.
Oh, okay. So they now know as part of their process, just click that dot and they'll get today.
Click the dot and they don't have to think about it. Because it does like a little drop-down calendar or whatever. And I'm like, just click there. That may, because they're 99% of the time, they're filling out that certification the same day.
Yeah, for that same day, yeah.
Yeah. So I made it simple for them to fill out. And then what else I wanted, and this is a whole different workflow, but I'll quickly describe it. In the case that a bus is not ready, we need to know why. And so I have a multiple choice question. And if they choose yes, right, yes, the bus is good to go, then submit the form. No, then it takes them to the repair requests.
Right. So you're using that setting in Google Forms where underneath multiple choice or drop down questions, you have an option of I think it says go to section based on answer, right?
That's it.
And so you select that. And then for each answer, you could say, if yes, go to the submit page. If no, go to the repair page or whatever. Okay.
That's it. Yep. Because I wanted them not to leave the pre-trip form, right? If something was wrong.
Right.
And then my requirement was I need to know what's wrong. Our mechanic needs to know that. Mm-hmm. And I also want to know, like, okay, well, what spare bus are you going to take? Things like that.
Right. And you don't want somebody else to have to go through clicking like NA on all of those, right? You don't want to leave those questions there for everybody. So you kind of hide it so that if you don't need it, it doesn't even show up. But if you need it, it's really efficient. Yes.
And I didn't want him to have to leave, like say, no, my bus is not good to go, and then open up another form. Because then that would lead to sort of bad data, and we don't want that. So I kept all that in the same form. And then they click submit, and then good to go. And then a couple of things then that happen after that form, all the answers come into a spreadsheet. That gets kind of messy, right? Because the driver for bus 1 is going to fill it out, then bus 22, then bus 14, then bus 6. They don't all come in at the same time. Right. So what I do in the spreadsheet for compliance work, which I then share back with them, through this driver hub, I have another link that shows them this. So if they ever have a question like, hey, was this bus pre-trip today? Because what will happen is a substitute will come in and drive, or we have a field trip later in the day. You only have to pre-trip at one time. So then I wanted to, actually a driver came to me and said, well, it'd be nice if I knew if the bus was done or not. I'm like, well, let me build that for you. So I then take the form data that comes into my Google Sheet, which I don't know what I would do without Google Sheets.
Right, me too.
I think if you had asked earlier, and maybe this is on there or not, but you asked the question about would you rather or what would be less torturous. If you had said that I would have to spend a week without Google Sheets,
right,
that would be bad news.
Right, I'm with you.
So in the sheet, what I do is I take
that would be a good question, right? Google Sheets or Google Docs? Which of the following would be less torturous, living without Google Docs or Google Sheets?
Well, I could type a whole essay in Sheets. So like,
right, I agree. I'm with you.
Yeah. So what I do then in the Google Sheet, this is my recommendation. Whenever I do a session on Google Forms, my recommendation is always to leave the initial sheet that collects all the data, just leave it alone. And then in my case, what I ended up doing is I built a couple of pivot tables, and I know that
Mhm.
scares the pants off of some people, but what I needed to see was by date, by bus in numerical order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever we have, and then whether or not the pre-trip was done and by whom and what time.
Uh-huh.
So I was collecting that from the form. I get my timestamp automatically, get my bus number in a column, I have my driver name in a column, and then the pivot table just allows me to sort of collect every pre-trip from the 15th, or whatever date it is,
Mhm.
and then show me that list.
That's interesting you're using a pivot table for that, because I normally think of a pivot table as being like when I want to total stuff up. Like if I wanted to total up, like I don't know how many times bus 32 was approved to go and how many times it wasn't approved to go or something like that. But you're kind of using it almost like a filter and a sort, right?
Yes, but the dicey thing I think with filtering and sorting is that you can export some data, or you can move some data from one sheet to the other or whatever, right? But I wanted specifically to be able to toggle on and off essentially. So I expand the date and then I can minimize it because then I want to see the next day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So that's some kind of higher level use of pivot tables. That's cool.
Oh, maybe. And for those out there, if you're nervous about pivot tables, this is one of the ways I found to sort of just wrangle data that's helpful. So anything that you have in a column, then becomes a row. And so to make this kind of pivot table, you make the pivot table and then you add some rows. And so my first row is the date, the pre-trip date, which is what they put in. And then the second row in my pivot table is the bus number. And then by so doing, it'll order it, alphabetically or alphanumerically. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, because our buses are all, numeric. And then the driver name, and then the actual timestamp, because I'm interested in when they did their pre-trip, right?
Right.
Because we had that one driver came in at 5:40, so I know she's going to spend time from 5:45 to 6 o'clock. But then if I know a driver comes in at 6 o'clock and they fill out the pre-trip at 6:01, now we're having some issues, right? Because it should take 20 minutes.
Something's happening there, yeah.
Yeah, and then
something's not happening is probably more accurate.
Yes, that's right. And so then I look at that, and then what I've been doing so far is I'll go in and check just for kind of quick compliance, and then I leave that day open. And then when I do it tomorrow, I'll close yesterday's date or today's date, right? So today I closed yesterday's date, and then just today's date is open. So if someone needs to then check, I have a direct link from that driver hub, which is that website we built in Google Sites, has another different icon, but I think it's a magnifying glass or something, check pre-trip status. And then they're taken directly to that pivot table, and it's nice and easy because it's numeric, and they can check, oh yeah, bus 18 was done today by so-and-so.
Now, do you have that table published to the web and then that is embedded, or does it actually jump directly into the spreadsheet?
So it just jumps right into the spreadsheet with view rights,
right?
Because that's the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
And you can link specifically to I don't even know, what do you call that? I call it a tab, I guess.
Yeah.
The multiple sheets within a workbook. I don't know. That's sacrilege. But
yeah, I always struggle with what to call them because I think Google actually calls them sheets. But then I'm like, well, you can't call the whole thing Google Sheets and then call the individual tabs along the bottom sheets.
Yeah, Excel, it's a workbook with sheets in it. That kind of makes sense, but I bet there's some copyright issues there.
Yeah.
So then I wanted to just kind of finish that out because I know there's 10,000 pieces and parts, and I know that for some folks, this comes easy. For those of you out there that are going to the iTip conference, the Google Summit, later, I think it's in May, I'm going to actually be doing a session on how to set up a sort of a hub and a kiosk and all the things that go together there. And that might be a session worthwhile visiting.
Right. Yeah, because it's neat to hear about this stuff, but it's certainly everybody probably wants to put their eyes on it. So I think if you'll give me some screenshots, we'll stick them in the show notes. But for those of you Ohioans or Eastern Michigans, Michiganites, I don't know, that'll be in Sandusky. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing that session too, so I could see what these things look like and how you're using these pivot tables, because pivot tables are they're fascinating. You could do a lot with them, but I find them to be very, very tricky.
They're like a mystery, but once you figure some stuff out, I feel it's easy to branch. I just pivoted some data for our district leadership team the other day, and those folks were like, "What? Did you put on a magic hat?" I'm like, "No, Like, it's fine. It's normal. But that gets me excited. Again, that's what feeds that inner fire for me. Like, oh, great. Now I just made someone's job easier.
Right.
And so that to finish out this whole pre-trip business, because I know it sounds like a big deal, but and it is a big deal in the bus driving world. What I needed then as sort of the supervisor, the guy who's kind of like responsible for some of this stuff, if a bus was not ready, right, I needed to know. And so I tap into a tool called FormMule.
Okay.
And FormMule will attach in your Google Sheet, and it'll do some things for you, primarily send a few emails out based on rules that you set. And so what I needed was, if a bus was not okay to take on the road, I needed an email to know that and to sort of document it. And then our mechanic needs to know.
Right.
And so I set up a workflow there that, based on that column where they say, yes, the bus is okay, or no, the bus is not okay, I said, hey, FormMule, if it's no, the bus is not okay, send an email with this information to these email addresses.
Right.
And that's a pretty simple setup. That's like the first dive into FormMule.
Yeah, FormMule is probably like my number one Sheets add-on. And the reason is you could set notification rules so that you get notified whenever somebody submits a new form, but you don't want to be notified of every, yes, my bus is okay. And
no.
There are a lot of mail merge tools out there for Sheets. There's like yet another mail merge is one's name. And there's like at least 5 of them that I've heard people name. But what I really like about FormMule is, like you said, you could set that rule that says, if they select no on this question, then email me. And if they select yes, nothing happens, right? Because that's what you want. But you can also set it as, if they select yes, maybe email this person. Like, you don't want that in your situation, but you could have different rules based on different responses. And yeah, I love FormMule for that reason too. Yeah. And for listeners who haven't used it, it really is not that difficult of a tool to use.
No. And I will say, it does take some planning. So you have to have in mind already, like when you're building that Google form,
right?
And, like that comes with experience. You have to know, okay, like I'm going to ask for a distinct value that'll be forced upon them. And it's basically, yes, my bus is okay. No, it's not. So that I can trigger off of that. It's called a trigger in FormMule.
Right.
So that I can tell FormMule, hey, if this column or if the cell is this, then do that. And so it's dangerous, I think, sometimes. Like if you try to build FormMule off of like an open-ended question or open-ended data from then it's not going to work.
Right, because if I type nope, it might not trigger it. Because you set the trigger to be no, so you really needed to be like a multiple choice.
Yeah, so that comes back to that data validation piece in your design thinking a little bit of sort of like, how do we make this easy? Yeah. Same thing like with the driver names. Like instead of having an open-ended, like what's your name, it's a drop-down, because I know it's a finite list of people. I know who the bus drivers are.
Right.
And so whenever you can make a finite list happen as opposed to open-ended,
if it's open-ended and on one day I type Jake and the next day I type Jake Miller, then those in your pivot table, those are 2 different values. So you need it to be together. Yeah. And I would do you use FormRanger for that, or do you manually put it into the form?
So there, because it's such a finite list, like we have 25 drivers, right? Right. I copy and paste from another sheet where I have them all. Yeah. And then I kind of standardize. So my list is like their last name, comma, first name, because I'm all about like, we got to sort alphabetically and things like that. And it's quicker for me to just, copy paste. Now, here's what I love, like the new feature in Google Forms where I can reuse a question from another form.
Yeah.
Shazam. So I already had that on another form. So it's just a matter of like, well, I used question 4 from this other thing. Boom, done. And I don't have to do double duty.
And it pulls that list in there. So I had a situation years ago, and I know you and I have talked about this before, where I built a discipline system for a school I used to work for. And it was a middle school with like 900 kids. And the teachers needed to be able to select whatever kid they were, reporting some kind of discipline incident with. And same thing there. We didn't want, like, if you call the kid Jake and this teacher calls him Jacob and this teacher wants to use full name or something like that, we wanted that to all be one piece of data. So we needed to formalize it. But we had kids moving in and moving out of the school regularly, so we needed a way to maintain it. And because it's not, your 24 bus drivers and it's rare for there to be changes there, we needed a way on the back end for that to be more efficient. So we had a Google Sheet with a list of all the names, and then we had a guidance office secretary who would type in the new names or take out the names as kids moved in and out. Yeah. And then I think I had maybe a sort formula, keeping them in alphabetical order. and then I was using the Forms add-on FormRanger to pull in that list. And so every hour it would go kind of Google Forms would go check and see, do I need to update this list here? So that always like that new kid would be in that list too. Now you don't need that because like you said, it's a small group of people. It's rare for you to have to change a name in there. But in that situation, I needed to be able to change regularly, like almost daily. Yeah, no,
that's a great suggestion. I will say too, from a design perspective, I try to stay as lean as I can.
Yeah.
So I know sometimes the tools, like we talked about FormMule, FormRanger, and then there's another one called AutoCrat, and they're all by the same team, right?
Right.
Am I right?
Yep. They're all from New Visions.
And they work fantastically. Sometimes I find that if I'm running all of it in the same thing, all in the same sheet, like it doesn't necessarily fire when I want it to. So just, like, I guess my advice would be like, just don't overdo it. So in my case, like I only have 25 drivers. I don't need to use the FormRanger.
Right.
But if you have 1,000 students, then that would be a bear to manually keep up with.
Right.
I do use this, so then the same list of drivers, but then I have a list of, this is a different spreadsheet altogether for all of our field trips that we do.
Okay.
I want to assign, and this is where I use AutoCrat a little bit for trip tickets, because that's mandated by law that they actually get they have a piece of paper actually. So that sheet gets a little bit complicated, but what I do there is I do quite a bit of VLOOKUP because it's easier for me to build an AutoCrat workflow. And AutoCrat, for those of you out there, is I think of it as a mail merge or like a merging tool. Would you agree, Jake? So I can take data in a spreadsheet and get a document out of it. That's what I use it for.
Yeah. So FormMule makes an email. AutoCrat makes either a document or slides or a PDF of that document or slides and sends it in an email. So it's like that extra step of not only is it the email and not only can it be generated based on a certain rule, but it also creates that document. And there's a lot of choices in there. Do you want the document to be editable or just viewable? Do you want it to come through as a PDF? Do you want one document with like all the field trips listed, or do you want a separate document for every field trip, which is what you would be choosing there? And you'd probably want it to be a PDF because you don't want that person on the other end to edit it at all. But that's AutoCrat that you would do that for. Definitely a merge tool is what you call it.
And what I found there, just building that workflow, because that's quite a lot of columns that I pull data from, like the driver name, driver phone number, this and that or whatever. So what I did is I kind of created some sheets on the back end. So that workbook or file or whatever you want to call it probably has like 15 different sheets in it. And so one of those lists is the driver in one column, their cell number, and then their email. And then in another sheet, I have the trip contact or like the group contact. So that would be a coach or it would be a teacher on a field trip or something like that. I require that they I know their email address because they work here, but then I need their cell phone number too. And then I pull all of that into like the first sheet,
right,
where I get then a complete listing of like the date, the pickup time, the drop-off time, the address, the who's going,
right,
who's the driver. And instead of me kind of like jacking around there, what I did is I want the driver to be listed, then their phone number, then their cell number. So I use VLOOKUP, and I don't want to lose folks in the audience, but
no, I think
then I'm pulling from these other sheets simply by using a drop down. So I do some data validation in the column. I say select your driver, and then based on who the driver is, it'll do a VLOOKUP and then populate cell phone and email address.
Right. So you could ask that driver to type those things, but you're trying to make it number one more efficient on their end and make sure it's accurate on your end, right? Because if they type in the wrong email address or something or the wrong phone number, then your system might kind of be broken. So you want to make sure it works right, and you want to save them some time. So essentially, what's happening is if that person types in Miller, Jake, if that's the selection they make out of the dropdown is Miller, Jake, then you're telling the spreadsheet, okay, go to this other tab, find Miller, Jake, pull the value for his phone number out of column C, pull the value for his email address out of column D, and pull them over here so that then we could generate this document that has all of the information we need it to have, or so that we can use FormMule to send him an email if that's what we might need to do.
Yes, that's right. And so I do that for both driver and then the group contact. And just like you said, if you can standardize data and then kind of force validate, if you think of it that way. Right. So like by just clicking a drop down and saying, I'm going to choose Jake, all the other stuff gets filled in automatically using VLOOKUP. Then you don't have to think about it and you get the better information.
Today's super secret code is Sweden, as in the country that Andreas is is from Sweden. So to get your certificate for listening to today's episode, head to eduducttape.com/certificates and type in Sweden.
The other thing I've done there, this is kind of moving off that pre-trip workflow a little bit, but just so that folks know that it's available. So AutoCrat then creates this email that basically with the attached trip ticket, and it'll email out to like the athletic secretary, my secretary to print out, and then to the driver and then the group contact, right? So that they all get it electronically.
Right.
And then in that email, because you can compose your email, it's really like the share notice or like the email that comes out. I also then link like, here's the Google map, like here's the address, and here's a hyperlink.
Yeah.
And then I also automatically generate the driving instructions from the school district to that place.
What? Do you have that in your spreadsheet somewhere? Like you've already prepared those or something?
Yep. They automate. So what they do is I played around with how accurate Google Maps or essentially like how dirty can the data be that you feed to Google Maps for it to accurately generate the address and the instructions. And it turns out that it's quite loose in terms of how it can error correct.
Okay.
And so all I ask from this spreadsheet, I have access to it, edit rights, and then the athletic secretary at the high school, and then our athletic coordinator at the middle school. So it's only 3 folks that can edit the primary sheet, and then all of the other sheets are locked.
Right.
I'm the only one that can edit because I don't want too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, for sure.
But all they have to put in is that they're going to be at, Orange Middle School, and it's 123 Main Street,
right?
And then just Pepper Pike, Ohio. They don't even need the zip code. And then what I do is I went to Google Maps, hung out there for a while, looked at how they formulate their URLs, and then basically just did a concatenate statement. I'm a big fan of the concatenate. So I just then concatenated in, Pepper Pike, Ohio, middle school, Pepper Pike, Ohio. And then it kind of just auto generates a URL for the driving instructions, and then I throw that in the email.
Wow. Okay, so it's coming in as a link that they can click on, but it's already, instead of them going to Google Forms and typing in the address and going to there, you're having it auto generate that link for them.
Yes, and then so what my secretary does, she just clicks the link, prints that map out because that's required by law. That's one of those things that's required for a school bus driver. But then the coach can kind of verify, like, yep, they have the right place.
Right.
The driver, half of our drivers use their own phones or they'll bring their own GPS or something to navigate with. They can plug it in, verify that they get the right stuff. I think it works pretty well. It works pretty well for us. All with the magic of sheets.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So to do that, you're using, so you went to Google Maps and you routed yourself to some generic location, doesn't matter where, and then you looked at that URL that it created, and then you kind of noticed or found the spot in that URL that's specific to the place you're going. So it would say the address to whatever random place you picked then. Yeah. And then you're using a concatenate statement to combine the part of the URL that's standard for everybody with the part of the URL that's based on what that was typed in, and then it's creating this link that's then going into that formula. Then click on. Yeah. Right. And I'm guessing you also need the substitute formula in there, right?
Yes, because then that will then kind of substitute like empty spaces and things like that.
Correct, yeah.
And so then the substitute just kind of removes that and says, like if it's nothing, then just don't do anything with it. It takes a little bit to do, but like once you have a basic idea, and I think, I typically show the concatenate feature when I do a spreadsheet class. Yeah. And it typically trips a lot of people up. Yeah. There's some other ways to concatenate. I know you're a big fan of just like the ampersand.
Yeah, I use the ampersand, yeah.
I'm a little bit nervous about that because I haven't spent enough time with it. So I just like write full out concatenate statements because it works for me. And I think that's important too with your, like the whole idea of like duct tape, technology, like do what works for you.
Exactly, yeah.
But always be in the mindset of, hey, we could probably do this in a better way.
Right.
So the spreadsheet for trips, the field trips that I'm in now is version 2. Because I had one last year, and then I was like, here's what's really working about this spreadsheet. Here's what's not working. Here's what else I would like for it to do. So that's what I do. I spent a couple of days in the summer kind of like, here's what I want. The Google directions was one of them.
Interesting. That's really cool. Yeah. And I like how, again, like going back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning, is that you're doing all of this highly technical stuff on the back end that's probably making some people's head spin, but you only had to do it once, and you did it so that it made the results easier for you to utilize, like you were talking about those pivot tables, but it also made it easier, the input on the end of the end user, your bus driver or whoever it might be, or the field trip requester. You made the input experience as streamlined, as easy and quick as possible, and you made the output as useful and easy to read and easy to process as possible. You are doing it based on what you know they're going to need, and what you know about their needs and their experience with technology and the way that they use it and things like that. You're really, I mean, it's design thinking, like you said.
Yeah, and I think, you got to start with the end in mind. You have to have an idea of like, here's what the way I see this going, or here's the way I would like for this to work. How do we get there? And sometimes that doesn't take very long, because like in my case, I'd already run like version 1 of this one spreadsheet. And in other cases, It's like you're doing it for the first time. And
yeah, and sometimes you got to do that, right? Where you roll the best version of something out. Whenever it might not be perfect, it's not perfect, but it's good, it's, as good as you can get now, and then you get it out there, and then you find out kind of where it can be improved, and that becomes version 2.
Yeah. And I think, if anything, you walk away sort of do you know what the TLDR is?
Yeah. TL semicolon DR.
Yeah. Too long, didn't read. So the TLDR is like, got to be in the mindset of wanting to, and knowing that you can improve stuff that you're doing all the time. It never stops. Change is constant.
Yeah, that's the Andreas Johansson mindset right there.
That's it for sure. Sometimes it drives people crazy, but that's okay. I'm okay with it.
You're getting the job done, right?
That's right.
Yep. All right. Well, I think everybody is like either like scribbling down ideas right now of all the different processes they can change in their district, or they're taking a Tylenol maybe.
Yes, or 2.
Or 2. Yeah. But some of them are probably preparing an email for you to ask you about how you did one of those things. So if they want to do that stuff is all in the show notes, that contact info, the Twitter, the website, the YouTube, the LinkedIn, and all that stuff. So you guys could reach out to Andreas and ask him questions about all this stuff.
Anyone who wants this transportation spreadsheet, send me an email. I'll send it to you. No problem.
That's awesome. Yeah. And send me some screenshots from stuff, and we'll put them in the show notes for everybody to see too.
Yeah. That'll be great.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for doing this, man.
Anytime. Happy to help. So excited.
Okay, so that does it for the regular episode portion of the interview with Andreas. Right before that ending bit there, he also shared about a system for his bus drivers to claim field trips that involves more FormMule, more AutoCrat, more pivot tables, and Google Sheets checkboxes. I really found that discussion fascinating, that the part that he shared there at the end that I had to take out of this interview in this format here, I really found interesting. I wanted to include it, but as I said, I want to keep these episodes a little bit shorter than they've been in the past. So that part, along with some other content about orienteering, tabs in Google Sheets, and checklists, are all included in a bonus MP3 file that is linked in the show notes. I linked it at the top and bottom of the show notes, so you can find it in both places. It might not play within your podcast app, but hopefully, since it's only about 15 minutes long, it won't matter if you have to listen to it in your browser or something like that. I'm curious to hear, by the way, if you're up for sharing, if you're glad that I reduced the length a little bit, or if you wish the content was included in the episode, as well as if you do try to access that bonus content, how you feel about that experience. Okay, so now really quickly, some content from the Duct Tapers. First is usually Apple Podcast reviews, but I've read them all. I've read all the ones that are in there, so we'll skip over that. Next up are my favorite tweets. I've got 5 to share this week. The first one comes up from Angela Green, and it's her entry into the We Video contest from the episodes with Manny Discotech. She said, "You are getting very sleepy at Manny Discotech and at JakeMillerTech. When you hear the sound of this tweet, you will awake with a huge urge to make at Angela Green 12 the winner of the at We Video giveaway announced on the hashtag EDU Duct Tape podcast. She will transform education with this tool." Angela had a whole string of good tweets, little fun tweets about the contest and her entries to win. Next up is Christina DiMaselli and her entry into winning. She said, "Why should I win the We Video prize? I have high school kids who have voices that need to be heard. Time to teach their teachers about teen vocab. That's part of the plan. Green screen, students and teachers learning from them. Super excited." And then she threw in a RuPaul gif. I think she's trying to buy Manny off with a RuPaul gif there. Next up, John Hartman, hollering back at me. I guess maybe hollering's maybe not the right word, for calling him out last week for his tweet where he pointed out that I had just followed him, despite the fact that we've been interacting on Twitter for over a year. And he said, when you get a shout out on the newest episode of @JakeMillerTech's #EDU duct tape, and then realize what the shout out is for. And it's one of my favorite GIFs with Homer moving back into the row of hedges. Up next, Andy Conniven, Andy, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right, at Mr. Coach K15, said, wake up. At Jake Miller Tech, at WeVideo, at Manny Discotech just dropped an epic #edu duct tape podcast opportunity. And he shouts out his friend at Stevie Frank 23. He says, we have been discussing and starting student podcasting and, no big but both have #Flipgrid Fever. So this is a perfect app smash possibility. I like that not only is Andy sharing how he's going to use the WeVideo, but he's using the big and big but from last week's soapbox moment. So Andy, thanks for that entry there. And finally, a little over a week ago, I shared an episode of the We Got Tech Ed podcast, hosted by Eric Guys and Nick Johnson. It was their one where they were sharing their 20 different tools to check out in 2020. So I shared a tweet about it, and I said, Guys Got Tech Ed and Nick Got Tech Ed, those are their handles on Twitter, share 20 different tools to check out in 2020 on this We Got Tech Ed episode. I'm not intrigued by Pick Wizard, Voice Notes 2, and Link Club. How about you? I actually meant to say I was intrigued by those. What a horrible tweet. You guys, you shared this stuff, and I'm not intrigued by these 3 particular things. The other 17 you shared, they're great, but those 3, not intrigued by them. So then when I noticed that I had done it, I retweeted myself with the text, this is the most ridiculous, clumsy-thumbsy autocorrect fail. I meant I'm intrigued by, not sure where the not came from, and then a facepalm emoji there. And then friend of the show, Laura Cahill, that's at Engage Educate, responded and said, it'd be pretty funny if you started a segment of #edu duct tape to discuss things that do not intrigue you, though, and we could call it Boring Bites by Jake Miller. Laura, that is an idea. I don't know if it's a good one, but it's definitely an idea. Next up, we normally share from the Flipgrid for the show, but I'm going to skip that today in interest of getting out of here. And we're over an hour, guys. I tried to get under an hour, but whatever. We'll take it. I'm going to skip that part and finish off the show by naming some of our new #edu duct tape tweeters of the last fortnight, at AT Kaufman, at Banda Book Chat, at B Riker, at Daily STEM, at Dominic Slauson, at EdTech_workshop, at EHLMS Tech, at FL Rimmer, at Hesk Tech, at Hickstro, at It's the Mitchell, at Jess Hug Steam, at Carl O'Leary 4, at Ken from Nelson, at K Claster, at Lift Off to Learn, at Michelle Carmody, at Mr_Van_W, at MRKGSW, at Mrs. Dye, at Ms. Romero R, at My Life as Lynn's, at RER in to go, rarin to go, maybe, at Saya Stacy, at SD Reed, SDEE Reed, at Sean S. Paventa, at Techie Leader EDU, at WAGJUER, and at Wainscott Tech, Wainscott_Tech, I should say. And with those new tweeters, however many that was, there about 30 or so, that put us just about at 600 different people who have tweeted about the show at some point or another in the last about 13 months since it's been on the air. And that doesn't include retweets. So probably by the time I come back a fortnight from now, I will be sharing our 600th set of tweeters, or we'll be breaking the number 600, which will be very exciting. Okay, finally, a reminder, if you'd like some stickers or to pass some out, there's a link in the show notes. We'd love to have you join us for the chat next week. We'd love to have you in the Duct Tapers Facebook group. And if you haven't done it yet, I'd love to have an Apple Podcast review from you. Thanks for all that you do as a listener, as a lifelong learner, and as an educator. Have a great day, and I will see you in a fortnight.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please visit eduducttape.com to join the discussion, share possible topics, inquire about being a guest, or contact Jake. And remember, duct is spelled with a T, not a quack quack K.